Hello everyone. I'm going to talk about the third lesson that we've learned from imaging and imaging outcomes. And this is about understanding how OFISA should be applied in terms of imaging outcomes. So you'll be familiar with the OMERACT filter instrument selection algorithm, or OFISA. Most of you can probably recite this by heart, I'd imagine. And remember the chevrons here that ask us about match with domain, feasibility, numerical scores making sense, then discrimination. And on the basis of those, we decide whether we endorse an instrument or not to go forward. And this was primarily developed based on patient-reported outcomes. So I think bringing what we've learned in this session, there are areas you've heard lessons on domain match and different levels of definition and sources of variability. So how do they match to OFISA? Well, the first two match with, both those first two match with truth and is it a match with target domain, but variability in particular also relates to whether these numeric scores make sense. Let me explain a bit further. So domain match is about face validity, and this about us understanding through lit reviews and consensus meeting the theoretical definition. And from the previous examples, you will have heard the theoretical definition was looking at concepts, say for ultrasound, looking at ultrasound joint inflammation. It was about looking at synovial thickening and increased blood flow. So that's the theoretical definition. And normally we can understand something of those from systematic lit reviews. The content validity then looks at the domain elementary components or the operational definition, such as for ultrasound, hypoechoic synovial hypertrophy or thickening. And that's going to require, in that stage, in that development, some sort of call for images is the phrase there, but getting images from all our members that illustrate both single components and the severity that we want to see. And that's important. And not all tools have been developed that way, but if you're developing a new tool, that's what you should try and use. And then we want to review the development of the score, either retrospectively or prospectively. And again, that may involve a call for images to illustrate grading. Then we've got instrument calibration and understanding sources of variability. And most of these for people in the imaging world are not too new, but documenting the validity and reliability exercises that we do. For ultrasound, it might be on static images. For MRI, they're generally static images. And we like to look at the consistency between the theoretical and operational definitions, and then document the reliability exercises that are done on patients. And that will look at acquisition issues, equipment issues, standardization of acquisition protocols. So there's a number of things that we need to document in reliability exercises. And test, retest done under ideal circumstances is another part of instrument calibration. Then there's the applicability and feasibility. At this stage is the easiest thing, I think, for everyone to understand: cost, discomfort, invasiveness, all those things that we intrinsically know for the modern imaging modalities. But you can imagine that for things like PET MRI, it's completely different than for ultrasound. Now, under the next chevron of do numeric scores make sense, we'll all understand criterion and construct validity, and criterion being related to a gold standard, such as a biopsy, for example, for ultrasound detected synovial inflammation. And if we don't have a gold standard, then we might want to do construct validity. Does our tool measure the same as another tool measuring the same construct? But note that we've added in here now inter-rater or inter-method reliability, as that's part of truth too. Then we want to look at the next chevron on discrimination. And we want to look at elements such as longitudinal construct validity, difference between groups, so clinical trial discrimination, and in there is thresholds of meaning, something that we often haven't looked at in tools to date. So that's the third lesson, and it really is telling us that OFISA, with some minor changes, can be applied to imaging outcomes just as it can be applied to patient-reported outcomes.